Okay, so today we're going to talk about the replacements, and they have a cult following as considered one of the best rock bands. They're called the Kinks of the United States. But I think they're sort of like more like the Beatles. So I grew up in Minneapolis with the Minneapolis sound all around me. I was immersed in the scene, so um, I heard the replacements when I was a teenager through record playing, and I'd gone to the Orfolk Joke Opus record store a little bit, but not much. I'd barely gone in there. Mostly just wondered about it, and then I ended up playing in a noise, hardcore band that, um, was led by, a fellow who worked who became friends with that whole scene. He worked in the scene, he worked at the record stores. I think he worked at Orfolk. I might have gone into Orfolk when he was working there. Um, and he's a local guitarist, and his dad was buddies with, in the Bob Dylan scene on the West Bank in the '60s. So, what people don't realize is that the in the '80s there was a big like Beatles revival in Minneapolis, and Peter Jesperson was the manager for the replacements, and he worked at the record store, and he was one of the co-founders of the recording label that's discovered the replacements, and he discovered the replacements and got them recorded and was their or yeah, manager basically. um just through such close association, and he just published a memoir about his career. I have not read it. I've listened to interviews with him on YouTube. He's got several long interviews. And what I found fascinating was he started out trying to sell a UK rock magazine. He got 1,000 copies of it through his dad's career as the Midwest distributor for a British magazine distribution company that started out of Australia, but then it became more U.S. focused just because the U.S. had a bigger market. And so, in my opinion, that's kind of like there's this the record store he worked at was one of the names of the store was after a famous British folk rock musician. So there's definitely this big British Anglophile background to the development of the replacements. And Peter Jesperson, he's immediately thought that they sound like the Rolling Stones, but he himself was obsessed with the Beatles also, and I was too. But my closest friends' family they had all the Beatles records, and the first record I bought was Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and so Peter Jesperson, he had this ear for the independent rock music, and that's how they got hooked up with REM at the time. And um, actually, my cousin had predicted REM would be the next big band. He had heard them in Georgia also, but yeah. So um, the and then with the biggest record of of the Replacements, they named it after a Beatles album, and this was kind of sort of making fun of Peter Jesperson's obsession with the Beatles. But Jesperson actually did use the REM uh, guitarist as a stand-in for one of the better known songs on that Replacements album. And then he also used mandolin. So in a way, he was like George Martin, where he's trying in different instruments and to produce a better sound. And then later on, they'd use horns in the REM, and so then what happened is that Jesperson was basically a member of the band, but then when he was also hired to be the road manager for REM, and then at the time he thought this was fine, this is a good thing for the Replacements, but then Paul Westerberg was secretly mad about it, and then it came out in a well, basically, according to Jesperson, it's like, well, when they signed, when the Replacements finally got signed by a big label, through New York exposure, then they got rid of Jesperson because he was no longer like professional enough or whatever. And they said he drank too much, which was true, obviously, because he almost died from um, organ failure. But of course, that was part of the ban was the just like being as drunk as possible, as much as possible, and so that was part of their drive in the music. And if you think about it, like the whole secret of Jesperson and to find this secret like sound of the what they call the it sound, and they consider the Replacements to be it, and really was this sort of like magical convergence because Paul Westerberg was already songwriting, and then he heard the Stinson brothers with Chris Mars on drums, and he was really impressed, and so he was able to get into their band, and then so you already had like two, like when you combine those two really tight forces of music, but the got to realize like in the 80s in Minneapolis there was just this obsession with music because the winters were really cold and long, and it's like so the best thing to do is just to play music with your buddies, and that's what I did in high school. And but I was also playing classical music, and but there was overlap between the classical and rock scene. But at that point, what they call the Minneapolis sound was what I called it eclectic soup, because I even composed a song called Eclectic Soup. But so yeah, Minneapolis had a really unique like local music scene that combined all the different styles like avant-garde and global music, and Twin Tone was tied to the university because their recording studio was right by the in the university neighborhood because the guy doing the recording had gone to the university. And um yeah, so if it's pretty fascinating that the Peter Jesperson's sort of like British folk background, because Orfolk was the name folk joke opus was a British famous um, singer, and sounded kind of like Donovan, but that kind of like British folk rock sound. It's like mainly folk, but with the rock tinge to it. And then um, they really listened to, like, Robin Hitchcock a lot, and, like, so I listened to that when I was at the same time in high school, like, a couple years later, but I basically, um I had a connection, through my family, through the music scene, essentially, um, to the same kind of music that Peter Jesperson was listening to. So I think, I don't know, but thing is that after the replacements got rid of Jesperson, I think that was really the led to the like, he was, consider him to be part of the group because he knew what the sound sounded like, but it was connected to this sort of, like, dopamine bliss, experience that was also tied to their alcohol dependency, and Paul Westerberg, in an interview he made in, '83 before they had gotten signed to a big label, he just said, like, straight edge morons, talking about people who did not rely on drugs to capture that feeling of the music, and I thought that was a pretty strong phrase, straight edge morons, because essentially he's making the music dependent on the drug use, and so, yeah, eventually that's what killed, Bob Stinson, and I grew up right in Uptown in that same area where Bob Stinson was living in an apartment. I was around Minneapolis at the same time, so I probably, had some kind of interaction with these guys without even knowing it. But um, when I studied music from the age of 3, um, I just was looking for this deeper meaning of music, and I was involved in church music and stuff, and so it's kinda interesting because both Paul Westberg and Chris Mars, they went to Catholic school, which I don't think focused on the music as much, from what I know, like, there's this, like, divide where it's not integrated into the spirituality, so that I think that's, like, a disconnect where the music gets associated with not being, spiritual or whatever. And so then, yeah, after they got rid of Peter Jesperson and they signed on to the big label, then they got rid of Bob Stinson for the same reason they got rid of Peter Jesperson, too much drug use. And then after that, I don't think I don't think they sounded nearly as good because Bob Stinson, he provided that sort of like existential angst that made the sound really unique because he was, you know, the unauthorized biography of the Replacements was by, Mears. I haven't read that book either, but it is archived online, so you can read it online, but, he spent, like, I don't know, 7 years writing it or something, maybe even longer, I don't know, but the thing is that, it came out later, they realized that Bob Stinson had been, sexually abused by his stepfather, and that's why he'd been put in the group home, and then he came back and, so that's why probably why he just couldn't get out of the drug, addiction and finally died from either from organ failure or maybe overdose. There's still, like, debate over what actually did it, but the thing is he was that happened 10 years after he'd been kicked out of the band, and but it's kinda, the obviously the Replacements are still kinda playing because, Tommy Stinson, and he's just a couple years older than me actually, and Paul Westerberg still collaborate together, um, and have their solo careers and all that, and so, people come to Minneapolis just to, like, go on a little Replacements tour of all the significant spots. There's maps online, um, for example, Paul Westerberg was the janitor for Dave Dernberger's office, so he wrote his first band set lists were written on Dave Dernberger's, like, what do you call it? The office, paper or whatever, but the I actually met Dave Dernberger from my dad introduced me in the airport in DC 'cause Dernberger was coming through the airport, and my dad knew Dernberger because my dad was a big, like, Republican lawyer type, and, so anyway, yeah, it's kinda like small world, in the Twin Cities, and then so all the places that the like I said, I was part of the scene, so, like, a good friend of mine, he used to party at Babes in Toyland's house, which was right by, Peter Jesperson's, apartment, which was where the Replacements would, like, hang out all the time Peter Jesperson's apartment, which was right by the Twin Tone, office, which was connected to the record store, so it's, like, very tight, scene just in a few block area that I grew up in, and I was one of those straight edge morons because I didn't I was more focused just on the secret meaning of music and taking music to a deeper level, and, um, but, uh, the fact that, again, the the Replacements really were a product of Minneapolis, of the music scene, and it's hard to understand just how obsessed. I mean, I was called, like, Mr. Music by my choir, director in high school because I was not, like, technically skilled or talent well, I was considered to be talented by some people, but, I took piano lessons for 12 years or even longer than that. I lost count, but at the same time, I'm playing in this noise, hardcore band, and we combined all different kind of styles. So we had, country, and just me playing keyboards obviously was not like strict, hardcore punk. So, yeah, I think that Minneapolis sound was a really, like, byproduct of the diversity of the city kind of mingling. I was just reading, PBS just published a new video story on, Minnehaha Falls and how there used to be dance halls at the Minnehaha Falls where they were integrated, racially integrated. Hey, Irma. Nice. Yeah, the small universe meditation is the secret of the my music. That's became what I realized was based on the secret of music. And I just discovered there's a guy teaching the microcosmic orbit meditation in the big city near me. And so that's probably the only public, um, like, meeting of the small universe meditation like, in a public space. You can go once a week on Saturdays to practice with him, but for me, it's too long of a drive just for an hour practice, and, but it's just cool that there is at least one, like, public venue where he studied with Trinity Lin, so, yeah, so it's kinda like I attempted to get the word out about the secret of music in Minneapolis. I contacted, one fellow who's, like, a well-known music writer and who was got interested in qigong also. That's why I contacted him. He's like, "Well, there's this secret," because he was already a well-known music writer, and then he started practicing qigong. Hey, thanks. What's the tongue drum? You'll have to can you, like, upload a video about your tongue drum? I'll search that. It sounds cool. Um, yeah, I'm still doing the total gym. I don't, like I just do it when I want to, and I've been doing a lot of outdoor work, which I gotta go do right now. Oh, cool. Yeah, this it's we gotta have the Ukraine solidarity. Well, yeah, so the I don't know, like, it's easy to get nostalgic about the Minnesota music scene, or of course, most people know about Prince more than the Replacements, and if you listen to the Replacements, they get interviewed in '83, I think it was '83 or '84, and they do not mention Prince, but, of course, I think it was '85 when Prince really got big, and then at that point, the Replacements were signed, um, on the national label, so they kinda, like, stayed out of the Twin Cities, I think. Okay, cool. Sounds fascinating. Yeah, um, yeah, that's another thing, like, my mom saw Bob Dylan play at the in the by the university in the coffee house, or and when he went to New York City, Bob Dylan was known as a harmonica player. Like, there's an early news article, and he was playing backup harmonica. That was his, like, his way to get into the scene, apparently. But the thing about Bob Dylan is when he was playing in the coffee house in Minneapolis, he was playing with these traditional blues singers called Colonel Ray and Glover. And then my music buddy, like I mentioned before, his dad was close friends in that scene, and so my music buddy took me to see Colonel Ray Glover in the 1980s in the folk blues, acoustic blues music scene, and yeah, so my friend, he even like emceed a memorial concert for Spider John Kerner, who passed on. But my point is like Bob Dylan was really influenced by Spider John Kerner and Kerner Ray Glover to learn more like traditional blues. And yeah, the blue, and so, people don't realize like his his development as a musician was a lot of it was inspired by the Minneapolis music scene. And anyway, it's I think it's just a lot of fun, what can you say? Like, that's the benefit of, bigger city, different cultures mingling in the city, and then using music as a way for them to interact, like, in a positive way, and learn from each other and stuff. And, of course, Qigong master Jim Nance, he was in a band called Global Beat, and I didn't know that but it's really funny because when I was gonna major in music composition, and I chose the a self-designed option, and my focus was called Global Blues. That's what I called it, and that's precisely the same style that Jim Nance was focused on when he was playing music. And then he went straight from that into qigong practice. So it's the same kind of thing where, I mean, for me, I wanted to study the actual music theory and the philosophy and the mathematics and stuff. And so that's what I did. And that's why I did the meditation training, was because of the music training first. So I was studied music at the university, doing music composition, orchestration, um, at, first out east. I started out east, and then, I tested right into the 3rd year. I tested into the 3rd year of music in my 1st year of college, and I composed a fugue, um, that was kind of a joke because I called it "Troll Dance," and I was using a 4 track, but I didn't know how to use it because I was real, like, Luddite, but I composed it correctly, and then the guy who advised me, his name was David Musum, and then I didn't know it, but he was actually studying physics, and then he got into yoga meditations, and then he had an article published on Chinese, traditional medicine and the connection to music, and it was like I found it, just doing my own research, and I'm like, "Wait a second, small world." Wow, interesting. That sounds pretty amazing. I lost my connection to lights and auras and stuff because I just don't meditate hardly anymore, and you gotta store up the energy enough for it to get to that level, so yeah, um, yeah, so I appreciate your feedback, it's fun to hear from you, Irma, and glad you're doing well, and okay, NRG. Oh, energy, right. Okay, well, I now I gotta go mow the lawn, mow and do lawn work because 'cause we're getting a lot of leaves coming down. Yep, yep. My mom's turning 90, so I told her, "You got another 15 years." Alright, over and out.